Jackie.
Thank you, Karoline. There's been a lot of discussion about the Epstein Files and the president's comments yesterday calling it a hoax. Can you clarify which part of the Epstein hoax is the hoax part?
The president is referring to the fact that Democrats have now seized on this as if they ever wanted transparency when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, which is an asinine suggestion for any Democrat to make. The Democrats had control of this building, the White House, for 4 years, and they didn't do a dang thing when it came to transparency in regards to Jeffrey Epstein and his heinous crimes. It was this president who directed the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to do an exhaustive review of all files related to Jeffrey Epstein, which they did. The Attorney General and the FBI, led by Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, these are great patriots, some of the most trusted voices in the Republican Party movement. It's part of the reason the president appointed them to these high law enforcement positions, and they spent many months going through all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein, and they concluded what they found in that memo, which they drafted and they released. And so the president has been transparent. He has followed through on his promises to the American people, but he doesn't like to see Democrats and the mainstream media covering this like it's the biggest story that the American people care about. The president has been working so hard this week. On Tuesday, he went to Pennsylvania, where he secured $90 billion in investments for the Commonwealth, for the people of that state. After that, he came back to the Oval Office at 8 p.m. He went in there to whip votes to get the Genius Act signed into law. And because of his efforts, that bill is now going to be signed and passed. The following day, yesterday, he meets with a foreign leader, the King of Bahrain, to secure more investments into this country. And then yesterday afternoon, the president is in the East Room of the White House mourning with parents who have lost their children because of fentanyl, signing a bipartisan piece of legislation. And not a single cable network in this country took that event live and covered that event like they should. Those are the issues the president cares about. What could be more important to the American people than helping families who have lost their children? Those are the issues this president is going to remain focused on.
I understand he wants to move on from the story, but you do have some prominent figures, including the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, voicing support for the files to come out. Representative Massey collecting signatures that would force a discharge petition for a vote on the floor for this. It doesn't seem to be going away. What is stopping the administration from just redacting any sensitive information, grand jury information, and putting out what is appropriate so that the American people can decide and then let this story die?
Well, in terms of redactions or grand jury seals, those are questions for the Department of Justice. Those are also questions for the judges who have that information under a seal. And that would have to be requested, and a judge would have to approve it. That's out of the president's control. He has said, in agreement with some of the leaders on Capitol Hill, that if the Attorney General and the Department of Justice come across any other credible evidence, they should provide that to the American people. The president has said that, and he agrees with them on that.
Why did he fire Maureen Comey?
The Department of Justice did, and I would defer you to them. Dasha.
Has the White House been directly in touch with some of the NAGA influencers that are still not satisfied with the administration's handling? And has the message to them been similar to what the president has said, which is sort of either let this go or we don't need your support?
Well, look, the president and this team are always in contact with the president's supporters, with voices of many kinds on both sides of the aisle. I think that's part of the reason this president is a great president, because he's willing to listen and hear other people's perspectives. But ultimately, he has led this country, not just over the past 6 months to historic success, but also through his first 4 years as president. And as the leader and the creator of the MAGA movement, he has led through these perilous times for our country based on instinct and in the best interest of the country. And as I always say, the American people should trust in President Trump.
John,
go ahead, John.
Thanks a lot, Karoline. The president on Monday announced that if there's not compliance with Russia within 50 days, there would be increased tariffs. Can you explain how that works, first of all? What happens if Russia doesn't end its war with Ukraine in 50 days?
Well, in 50 days, as the president clearly laid out, if there is not a ceasefire agreement or a peace deal within that time frame, if Russia refuses to legitimately agree to a ceasefire, then they will face very steep tariffs, and they will also face secondary sanctions. So countries that are purchasing oil from Russia will be sanctioned as well, and of course that will do deep damage to Russia's economy. And I would just add that the president wants this wants this war to end with a diplomatic solution. He's been pushing for it. This administration has spent many hours and a lot of time trying to solve this war very far away, but the president wants to stop the killing and he wants to save lives.
As far
Reagan,
as the first part
go
of
ahead.
what you were saying, Caroline. the
Reagan,
first
go
part,
ahead.
I have two questions for you.
It's just about, if I may, just about the tariffs, the first part. I get the secondary tariffs, but there was only $3 billion worth of trade between the U.S. and Russia in 2024. It's expected to be far less this particular year. On April the 2nd, both you and the Treasury Secretary said it's not necessary to apply any tariffs on Russia. You said that because of the lack of trade, it precludes, that was the word you used, any need for tariffs. Why now, and why do you think that that would make them cave and come to some sort of peace agreement as it relates to Ukraine?
$3 billion is still a lot of money, John, and it's not just tariffs, it's the secondary sanctions as well that will be implemented in 50 days. Reagan.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions for you.
Sure.
First on Congress. Congresswoman Salazar introduced legislation that would give some illegal immigrants in the country a path to citizenship. 10 Republicans signed on to what she's calling the Dignity Act. I'm curious what the White House's position is on the legislation and if the president would veto this bill if it made it to its desk.
From my understanding, the White House nor the president has actually read through this legislation. We've been focused on, of course, the One Big Beautiful Bill, which passed, which is another historic accomplishment of this president in record time. The Genius Act this week, the rescissions package, that's been the focus of the White House. But the president has made it very clear he will not support amnesty for illegal aliens in any way.
I want to give you a chance to respond to the CEO of NPR. She's claiming that the cuts to their network will, quote, be a real risk to public safety of the country. Murkowski has argued that public broadcasting stations save lives. Could you respond to these concerns?
The NPR CEO said cutting NPR will be a risk to public safety. I am not sure how NPR helps the public safety of our country, but I do know that NPR, unfortunately, has become really just a propaganda voice for the left. Just a few examples for you. In 2020, NPR refused to cover the Hunter Biden laptop scandal in the run-up to the election. They said their assertions don't amount to much, writing they did not want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions. That does not sound like an unbiased opinion. That sounds like a partisan opinion to me. And this is a taxpayer-funded organization. In 2018, that same CEO that you're talking about called the president in the Oval Office, who nearly 80 million Americans elected, she called him racist, shared a photo of herself wearing a Biden for President campaign hat, serves on the board of a Soros-funded activist group. In 2020, PBS's White House correspondent at the time characterized President Trump's speech then at Mount Rushmore as a love letter to white resentment, promoting the myth of America. In 2017, PBS devoted an entire panel talking about what it means to be woke and white privilege. In 2023, PBS's Washington Week Roundtable covered up Joe Biden's clear mental divide. That's actually quite the clip. I would encourage all of you to look at it. These are not honest news organizations. These are partisan, left-wing outlets that are funded by the taxpayers. And this administration does not believe it's a good use of the taxpayers' time and money. Ed Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. I want to ask you about the Federal Reserve. So does the president believe that the slightly restrictive monetary policy stance right now, could that cause an economic slowdown? And if he does believe that, when?
What pause are you referring to?
No, could the stance of the monetary policy is slightly restrictive? Does the president believe that that stance, the slightly restrictive stance, could cause an economic slowdown in itself?
I haven't heard the president discuss that specifically, but what I do know in regards to the Federal Reserve is the president's been very transparent about his displeasure with both the policies and the management of the Fed, and he spoke about that to all of you pretty extensively in the Oval Office yesterday.
Yeah, and last month, one more if I could, last month the Canadian Prime Minister said the president had agreed to a July 21st deadline to sort of work towards a trade agreement. That's 4 days from now. Could there be a trade agreement with Canada in 4 days?
Well, look, we'll see. The trade team continues to be very active in our conversations and discussions with Canada. The president himself has said, unfortunately, our neighbors to the north have been pretty difficult to deal with when it comes to matters on trade. But in trade, generally speaking, as you know, 25 countries have received letters thus far from the president directly with his big, beautiful signature on them, from Japan to Korea, South Africa, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, just a few countries, and Canada also received a letter for 35%. With that said, if countries want to have legitimate further discussions, the Trump administration and the president's trade team are willing to have further talks, but these letters these countries have been receiving are the deals. And as the president has said, those deals will be made. They are tailor-made to each and every country based on the United States' concerns and what's in the best interest of the American worker and the American people. Charlie, go ahead.
Thank you, Karoline.
No, I called on Charlie, but Deanna, you can go ahead too. Go ahead.
The president said that he floated the idea of a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. Can you confirm that? And has he asked the Attorney General to do this, to appoint a special prosecutor to look it over?
Well, the idea was floated from someone in the media to the president. The president would not recommend a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. That's how he feels. And as for his discussions with the Attorney General, I'm not sure. Deanna.